Hello, this is Dr. Young. I'm going to go over your Week 7 lecture. This week we're going to talk about groups and teams. We're going to define groups and teams and talk about several types. And then we're going to talk about performance factors and how they relate to groups and teams and organizations. We're going to talk about team development, the costs and benefits of teams, team opportunities and challenges. We'll talk about virtual teams as well because that's a new thing. A more recent aspect of teams. So many organizations work in team formats, more than they used to. So we're going to talk about the types of teams. We have functional teams, which come from a department or functional area. We have cross-functional teams that work across different departments. We have problem-solving teams, established to solve problems or make improvements. Self-directed teams that set goals and pursue them without being directed by management as much, maybe, or a manager. Or venture teams that operate semi-autonomously to develop new products. Virtual teams that work anywhere in the world from home. And then global teams. Actually, global teams work anywhere from the world, but virtual teams work more of maybe in a geographical area. Sorry about that. Even though obviously global teams are virtual teams, so it's that kind of thing. Overlap. So there are performance factors in groups, and they are often determined by group composition, which is the degree of similarity difference between team members, size, group norms, which is basically what the standard of appropriate behavior is judged. So sometimes there's problems with group norms as far as conflict. Maybe a certain type of etiquette is not being maintained. Some people are more combative than others. You've got personality differences, so group cohesiveness is the commitment of teams to stay together. And then venture teams operate semi-autonomously to develop new products. So, these types of teams are very cohesive because they work together and they're basically doing their own thing to develop new products. So they're doing all the steps and coming up with all the things instead of being handed down direction as much as some other teams might. In a team, there's often an informal leader. They don't have the title of leader, but they might go ahead and engage in leadership activities, guiding and direction of the other members of the team. Sometimes they draw from referent or expert power. An example is someone who, might have specific expertise that's needed on that team. That team might look at that person as a leader because they have more knowledge than the rest of the team about a specific topic or subject. They're often trusted. Trust is a big deal. They can cause disruption to the organization under certain circumstances. Stages of group and team development. Mutual acceptance. Team members share personal information and get to know one another. Communication and decision making. Team members are more transparent about their feelings and agree on group role and goals. So, motivation and productivity. Cooperation toward completing tasks. Control and organization. Team is matured. Members work together well. So here is your kind of beginning and end. At first, they start to kind of develop a little rapport, give us background around, give us each other some background, maybe find some common personal interests. And then they start talking about, okay, so let's figure out who we are as a team, who's doing what, how they feel about what their role is, and then they move on to actually doing the task, working together, completing tasks together, and then eventually it becomes more of it becomes more comfortable, more automatic, and then you get a well-working a team that works well together. So, understanding team performance. Here you've got team efficacy. So that is basically, instead of personal, self-efficacy, you got team efficacy, which is basically team feels confident they can do this, they can reach their goals, they can complete the project, whatever it is. They trust each other that each one will do what their assigned part, or the part that they have decided to take on and commit to. Social facilitation occurs when a team is motivated to look good to others, and they want to maintain a good image. So they push each other to do their best because they want to look their best. They want to project that image. And then the roles, and this is, the roles of each team member has been clearly defined. They know what they're supposed to do. They know what their part is in this project or whatever it is that they're doing. And this is the implementation process. So, in the beginning of a team development, team members are selected, and then they're trained on what they need to be doing. After the training, and when it's time to get working, sometimes there's conflict. So there's sometimes, as they're getting to know their roles and what the project is, there might be some conflict. Then that's when a team leader needs to kind of be around to support that team and to help mediate some of that conflict. Then a team is appointed. Usually at some point someone becomes a leader in that team, like whether for whatever reason. There usually is one person that will stand out, that will provide leadership to that team, and then everyone's identities are formed at that point, phase 3. After the leader is identified, some of the conflict is kind of mitigated, then confidence begins to form. But even within, like, if in that small team, they start to build relationships, they can isolate themselves from everyone else on the outside. So that's always a problem that needs to be addressed as well. And then phase 5 becomes teams matured. They know how to work together. They know how to reach their goals. They're a well-oiled machine at this point. So that's the process. Cost benefits of teams. There's better performance. A lot of times there's reduced costs. This is due to these two things are very interesting, because that teams, there's more innovation on teams because there's more people are thinking of things in different ways and coming up with more solutions than one person would. So you might get some, enhanced performance and productivity there. Innovation, better ways of doing things, more efficient ways of doing things, more ways of cutting waste. All of these things come from different people that have different ideas, and can kind of be attributed to, this can be attributed to those kinds of things. When you think about it, a problem solved, this problem's going to get solved probably quicker and with a better resolution with a team than just one person. Other organizational benefits, obviously reduced bureaucracy, because when you have a team that can make some decisions on their own, they're not waiting for an answer handed down from management. Increased creativity and innovation, that's what I just talked about. But creativity and innovation for the sake of that, but then all of those things can lead to these things. You can be creative and find a way to reduce cost and reduce waste, reduce time spent, so it really is kind of a connection there. Employee benefits, self-fulfillment, dignity, self-control, less stress. These are all benefits of teams. But the costs of teams are manager frustration at roles, slowness, impatient by top management can lead to abandonment. So these are all the there's always pros and cons. There's lots of pros. There's some cons as well. Teams can get distracted. Teams can be slow. They can be. Managers can feel like they're not really doing a lot if the teams are kind of autonomous. See, so there's negatives. But the key is there has to be top management support. You have to decide to go to a team-based structure for sound business reasons. You have to be very clear about communicating the reasons for the change, and there's going to be transition periods that might be difficult. For example, I teach a class on lean. You may have heard about lean management. That's a transformation from a very different type of work from team-based work. There's way more to it than that. But that was a very, I've read about cases and scenarios where it's, people have tried to do it and then just kind of abandoned it. But it can be very difficult because when you have teams that work well together and know what they're doing, that can cause problem with management because they feel like, what am I here for? They're usually the ones handing down the directives to employees, and if teams become very autonomous and really good at what they do, then, there can be conflict there. There we go. Things can often get worse before they get better. It takes 1+ years before performance returns to pre-team levels. Like I said, team formation takes time, and there's conflict, and there's obstacles, and there's problems to solve. And then once it becomes, they work well together, then you can see a performance improvement in other things like the innovation and the cost. But you have to have the patience as an organization to go through the storm first. And if not enough time and diligence is devoted to planning the change, performance may never return to that. So you have to make sure that you have a plan in place to make such a huge organizational change in structure on how work is done. And if you're not planning for it, it can become chaotic and stay chaotic. Virtual teams are something that's becoming more and more common. You can have teams all over the country working online. I understand this very well as an online instructor. It can be very isolating, and it's hard to feel part of a team. So you have to make extra effort to communicate if you're going to lead virtual teams. It's difficult to mentor and do development in virtual teams. And many functions must be performed by the team without the leader being present. So in order to do virtual teams, you have to really already be at the end stage of formation, probably. Like, you have to be a team that works well together on projects. You have already established relationship, and you know how and when to communicate with each other effectively. So this is usually more valuable for teams that are already established, that already have a relationship. Anyway, important virtual leadership skills are communicate often, match technology to the situation, understand what everyone's doing, what their schedules are, how accessible they are. It's hard to do a conference if somebody's on the East Coast and the West Coast, so you might have to come up with a different method. If you need to communicate something, just deliver communications, make a video, something like that. you have to think about where they are and basically what their schedules are and their availability is. You want to value all contributions. You want to compliment. You want to make sure they feel like they're needed, that their contribution is valuable. Obviously, you want to establish a clear vision, team purpose, goals, and expectations. This is very important. You want to be repetitive in this area, probably. Lead by example and focus on measurable results. Make sure they understand how they're being measured in this virtual type of environment. I think the big thing here is don't blindside anyone. Sometimes you can miss a communication. They might think they're supposed to do something in a certain deadline. You have to be reminding them of this constantly. It's better to over remind than to over communicate than to not communicate enough in this kind of setting. Multicultural teams, diverse teams, you get more creativity and innovation, improved decision making and problem solving, but you get lots of misunderstanding and conflict at times. And sometimes you can't provide for all the members' needs. This is especially true if you're on a cross-cultural, global type of team. You have to think about cultural and language barriers. Even if everyone's speaking the same language, there might be different meanings for words. Anyway, so you have to really be careful with communication. And not just, one of the biggest things is understanding whoever you're working with and where they're at and what their culture is, and maybe some of the language, the words and terminologies you might not want to use, things like that. Then there's direct versus indirect communication. In non-Western cultures, meaning is embedded in the way the message is presented. So the way the message is presented is important. And we have difficulty interpreting that kind of indirect communication. There are some people in your team that wouldn't maybe not argue with you, like they don't feel comfortable basically debating with a team leader or older people or others they think have a greater status. So they might have more trouble seeing that the team is equal, even the manager or the leader, and they might not communicate with you and might not tell you something you need to know. So those are definitely, the attitudes here are important because you need to be openly communicating with each other. And so there's this there could be reluctance on some people to, communicate if they're having an issue or a problem or anything like that. And then conflicting decision-making norms. Some people cultures take longer to make a decision. In our culture, that might be a problem. We're got to do things fast. We got to get it done right away. We have deadlines to meet. This could be a problem. So you need to make sure that everyone understands how that works, however that works for your specific team. That's really all there is today. Thank you for listening, and have a great week.